Welcome back to Echoes of History. In our previous episode, we explored the origins of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC, how they emerged from the violent years of La Violencia and the failed government offensive known as Operation Marquetalia. But the FARC of the 1960s was just a small guerrilla group with 48 fighters. How did they grow into the most powerful insurgency in Colombia? Today, we uncover the expansion of the FARC, their strategy, alliances, and the controversial methods that fueled their rise. Imagine a Colombia where large parts of the countryside were under the control of armed groups, where the government's presence was weak, and where the promise of revolution inspired thousands to take up arms. This is the Colombia of the 1970s, a country where the FARC was no longer just a peasant resistance group, but an organization with national ambitions. From a small guerrilla to a national force. After their formal creation in 1964, the FARC followed a classic guerrilla warfare strategy. Instead of engaging the Colombian military directly, they established strongholds in remote rural areas, built alliances with peasant communities, and conducted hit-and-run attacks against government forces. Their strategy was clear: expand their influence step by step, consolidating power in territories where state institutions were weak or absent. The Colombian government, focused on urban development, neglected vast rural areas, creating a vacuum that the FARC quickly filled. By the early 1970s, the organization had grown from a few dozen fighters to several hundred. But expansion required resources. Weapons, food, and logistics were crucial for their survival. Without external financing, the FARC had to find ways to sustain itself. It was during this period that they implemented one of their most controversial policies, the so-called revolutionary taxes, the economic engine of the FARC. At first, these taxes targeted large landowners, businesses, and politicians. They were expected to pay in exchange for protection, or more accurately, to avoid being attacked. Over time, even small farmers were required to contribute, making the FARC's economic model indistinguishable from extortion. During the 1970s, Colombia's illicit drug trade was rapidly expanding. Coca cultivation became a booming industry, and drug traffickers began operating in territories controlled by the FARC. The guerrillas saw an opportunity and began charging taxes on coca farmers and laboratories. Though they did not initially participate in drug production, they facilitated its growth by providing security for traffickers in exchange for financial support. The Seventh Conference, Military Expansion and Terror Strategy. In 1982, the FARC held their 7th Guerrilla Conference, a meeting that would define the future of the organization. For the first time, they decided to move beyond defensive tactics. Their goal was no longer just survival. It was to take the war to the cities and escalate the conflict to a national level. A new military structure was adopted, dividing the guerrilla forces into different regional fronts across Colombia. They expanded their operations, increasing attacks on government institutions, police stations, and military bases. They also began forming alliances with urban revolutionary groups to bring the war to Bogotá, Medellín, and Cali. Another critical shift was their growing involvement in the cocaine trade. While they had previously only taxed coca production, by the mid-1980s, some factions within the FARC were actively participating in drug trafficking operations. This generated internal divisions, as some leaders insisted that the organization should remain focused on its ideological struggle, while others saw the drug trade as a necessary evil to finance their revolution. The government's response and the seeds of a new war. The Colombian government, increasingly alarmed by the strength of the guerrillas, sought to counter their expansion. With financial and military support from the United States, they launched a series of counterinsurgency operations, intensifying the conflict. At the same time, wealthy landowners and business elites, frustrated with the government's inability to stop the guerrillas, began financing private militias. These groups would soon evolve into the infamous paramilitary organizations that would become key players in Colombia's internal war. The stage was set for a brutal escalation. The FARC had transformed from a rural resistance group into a national military force, but their growing power made them the target of a new, even bloodier conflict. In our next episode, we will analyze the rise of paramilitary groups, the role of the Colombian military, and how these factors plunged the country into one of the longest and most complex wars in modern history. If you're enjoying this series, subscribe and stay with us as we uncover the hidden history of Latin American countries.